The encounter. The sky above was an endless sea of swirling purple and gold, an alien atmosphere that shimmered with a strange ethereal glow. Ethan's spaceship groaned one final time before it crashed into the dense, unfamiliar terrain. Sparks flew from the control panel, and the emergency lights bathed the cockpit in a pulsating red glow. His hands trembled as he unbuckled his harness, coughing from the acrid smoke filling the cabin. He stumbled out of the wreckage, his boots sinking into the soft, moss-like ground. The air smelled faintly sweet, mixed with the sharp metallic tang of burning fuel. Around him, towering trees with luminous blue leaves stretched high into the heavens. They seemed to sway gently, though there was no breeze. Everything was eerily silent. No chirping insects, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive quiet that made Ethan's skin crawl. He pressed a button on his wrist communicator, hoping for some sign of human contact. Static. The signal was completely dead. Great, he muttered under his breath, scanning the horizon. Stranded on a weird alien planet. Just my luck. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed behind him. Ethan spun around, heart pounding. A shadow darted between the trees, too fast to make out clearly. He froze, instinctively reaching for the survival knife strapped to his belt. Another shadow moved, then another. They were circling him, their movements deliberate, calculated. "Hello," Ethan called out, his voice trembling. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I need help." There was no response, only the soft crunch of footsteps closing in. The shadows emerged from the forest one by one. They were tall, slender creatures, their bodies encased in dark, chitinous armor that shimmered in the dim light. Their faces were obscured by smooth, reflective visors, but their postures radiated fear and tension. Each one carried a weapon that hummed with an energy Ethan didn't recognize. Ethan raised his hand slowly, his knife slipping back into its sheath. "I come in peace," he said, forcing a nervous smile. "No weapons. See." The aliens didn't move. They seemed to be communicating silently, their heads tilting slightly as if considering his words. One of them stepped forward, a large figure with a staff-like weapon glowing faintly at its tip. It raised a clawed hand, and Ethan felt a strange tingling sensation wash over him. His limbs went rigid, paralyzed by an unseen force. "Wait. Don't." Ethan's protest died in his throat as the aliens surrounded him, their movements swift and efficient. They bound his arms and legs with a flexible, glowing cord that felt like liquid fire against his skin. Panic surged through him. "You've got this all wrong. I'm not a threat," he shouted, struggling against his restraints. But his words seemed to only heighten their unease. Their weapons hummed louder, and their movements grew more erratic. As they dragged him through the dense forest, Ethan noticed something odd. The aliens weren't treating him like a prisoner of war. They were acting like prey trying to restrain a predator. Their glances at him were quick and fearful, their grip on their weapons tight. They kept a deliberate distance, as though expecting him to break free and attack at any moment. After what felt like hours, they arrived at a massive structure carved into the side of a jagged mountain. The building pulsed with a soft green light, its surface smooth and seamless, like it had grown naturally rather than being constructed. Ethan was pushed inside, the temperature dropping noticeably as the alien atmosphere gave way to a sterile metallic chill. The interior was vast and quiet, filled with strange machines that blinked and whirred softly. Ethan was placed in a transparent containment pod that sealed with a hiss. He pressed his hands against the cool surface, his breath fogging the glass. The aliens gathered outside, speaking in their incomprehensible language. Their voices were sharp and clicking, almost insect-like. Ethan tried to calm his racing mind. He needed a plan, but nothing made sense. Why were they so scared of him? What had humans done to earn this kind of reaction? His mind replayed the terrified looks on their faces, the way their hands trembled as they restrained him. It wasn't anger or hatred. It was fear, pure, unfiltered fear. One of the aliens stepped closer to his pod, its visor tilting as though studying him. Ethan met its gaze, though he couldn't see its eyes. "I'm not your enemy," he said softly, unsure if it could understand him. "I don't want to hurt you." The alien flinched slightly, then turned away, rejoining the others. They continued their discussion, their voices rising and falling in a rhythmic cadence. Ethan could only watch, helpless and confused. Whatever decision they were making, it wasn't looking good for him. As the minutes ticked by, one thought kept gnawing at his mind. Why were they so afraid? Humans weren't perfect, but they weren't monsters either. At least, not usually. He clenched his fists, his reflection staring back at him in the smooth glass. If he didn't find a way to communicate with them soon, this fear could lead to something far worse. Outside the pod, the aliens' discussion seemed to reach a conclusion. The larger figure stepped forward, pointing its staff at Ethan. The others stepped back, their weapons at the ready. Ethan's heart sank. Whatever they planned, it didn't feel like salvation. And then, just as he braced himself for the worst, a smaller alien pushed through the group, standing defiantly between Ethan and the leader. Its posture was hesitant but determined, and for the first time, Ethan saw something other than fear in their body language. Hope, a prisoner or a guest. Ethan sat inside the transparent pod, his breath creating small foggy patches on the smooth surface. The alien facility was a strange mix of natural and artificial. The walls glowed faintly, pulsating like a heartbeat, and intricate patterns swirled along the surfaces as if the building itself was alive. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of distant machinery. The pod vibrated softly as the platform beneath it began to move. It glided down a long, dimly lit corridor. Outside, the aliens walked in a formation, their movements synchronized like a well-rehearsed dance. Ethan watched them closely. Despite their intimidating appearance, they seemed hesitant. Occasionally, one would glance at him through the pod, its body language rigid with unease. Ethan's mind raced. These weren't the actions of hostile captors. They were afraid of him. But why? He was just a lone astronaut, unarmed and stranded. He leaned back against the pod, trying to piece together the mystery. Suddenly, the platform stopped. A soft chime echoed, and the pod walls dissolved into thin air. Ethan stumbled forward, catching himself on the smooth floor. Before he could stand, one of the aliens stepped closer, holding a device that looked like a cross between a scanner and a weapon. It emitted a sharp click, and Ethan felt a strange warmth spread across his body. "Hey, what's that?" he asked, raising his hands in mock surrender. "If it's dangerous, I'd rather pass." The alien tilted its head but didn't respond. Instead, it gestured for him to follow. Ethan hesitated but realized he didn't have much of a choice. He followed cautiously, his eyes darting around the cavernous room they had entered. The space was massive, filled with towering structures that resembled trees made of liquid metal. Strange, floating orbs drifted through the air, projecting holograms of data in symbols Ethan couldn't understand. A group of aliens stood near the center, gathered around what appeared to be a council table. Their voices clicked and buzzed, their tone sharp and urgent. Ethan's guide motioned for him to stop, then retreated to join the others. He was left standing awkwardly in the middle of the room, feeling like an insect under a magnifying glass. The council turned their attention to him, their visors reflecting the dim green light of the chamber. "All right," Ethan muttered, his voice breaking the silence. "Let's get one thing straight. I didn't come here to cause trouble. My ship crashed, and I'm just trying to survive. You don't have to." A loud, mechanical hum cut him off. One of the council members raised a slender hand, and a holographic device appeared between them. The projection showed a horrifying image. A massive alien city in ruins, fires raging across the landscape. Amid the destruction were crude, shadowy figures that vaguely resembled humans. They were monstrous caricatures, with glowing red eyes and jagged teeth, devouring everything in their path. Ethan froze. "Is that supposed to be us?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The aliens didn't answer, but their postures made it clear. They believed he was part of that legend, a terrifying myth of humanity's destructive nature. Ethan shook his head, panic bubbling beneath the surface. No, you've got it wrong. We're not like that." He gestured wildly at the projection. "Sure, humans aren't perfect, but we don't destroy entire planets. This is some misunderstanding." A soft, musical tone interrupted him. Ethan turned to see a smaller alien stepping forward, holding a sleek device that pulsed with light. Unlike the others, this one seemed less rigid, its movements curious rather than cautious. It approached slowly, its body language hesitant but not hostile. The alien raised the device, and a strange melodic voice echoed in the chamber, speaking in heavily accented English. "You speak words." Ethan blinked in surprise. "Yes, I can speak. Can you understand me?" The alien nodded slowly. "Your language difficult. Learning." Ethan felt a surge of hope. "Okay, good. Then listen. This is all a misunderstanding. I'm not a threat. I just need help. My ship crashed, and I'm stranded here. I don't know why you think we're monsters, but..." The alien held up a hand, silencing him. Its visor tilted slightly, as if it were studying him. "Humans consume, destroy, leave nothing." Ethan's stomach sank. The myths ran deep, but this alien, this translator, seemed open to questioning them. He stepped closer, ignoring the tense murmurs from the council. "I don't know where you got those ideas, but they're wrong. Look at me. Do I look like a destroyer to you?" The translator hesitated, then glanced at the council. They seemed divided. Some watched with narrowed visors, their weapons still drawn, while others exchanged uncertain glances. Finally, the translator turned back to Ethan. "Prove, not destroyer. Show kindness." Ethan straightened, his mind spinning. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "But you'll have to give me a chance." The translator looked at the council, clicking something in their language. After a tense moment, one of the larger aliens stepped forward, pointing a glowing staff at Ethan. It spoke in a low, rumbling tone, and the translator turned back to him. "Chance given. Fail, you die." Ethan swallowed hard, the weight of their words settling in. This was his only shot, to prove he wasn't the monster they believe humans to be. And he wasn't planning to fail, breaking the language barrier. The alien facility pulsed with an almost organic energy, a living machine wrapped in an aura of quiet menace. Ethan sat cross-legged on the smooth, glowing floor of his transparent cell, staring at the translator alien, Lyra, as he'd mentally nicknamed her. She stood on the other side of the barrier, her slender frame outlined by the faint green glow of the containment field. Her visor reflected his tired face, and he wondered if she could see his exhaustion, his fear. "You don't have to keep me locked up like this, you know," Ethan said, trying to sound calm. "If I wanted to hurt you, I'd have done it already." Lyra tilted her head, the movement almost bird-like. She raised a small, sleek device and began to manipulate its controls. A faint hum filled the room, followed by a garbled string of sounds that Ethan couldn't understand. It was alien speech, but closer, somehow, to words. Lyra was trying to talk to him. Ethan leaned forward, pressing his hands against the barrier. "Okay, let's try this again. I'm Ethan." "Ethan," he said slowly, pointing to himself. Lyra paused, then hesitated before attempting. Ethan grinned despite himself. "Close enough." She pointed a slender claw at him, her voice stilted. "Ethan, destroy." The grin vanished. No destroy." He waved his hands emphatically, shaking his head. "Help. I just want to survive. You've got the wrong idea about humans." Lyra's visor tilted as if she were processing his words. Then she tapped a button on her device, and a hologram flickered into existence between them. It was a crude image of a human-like figure, surrounded by fire and destruction. The figure was devouring something, an alien city, its inhabitants screaming in terror. Ethan's stomach churned. "Is this what you think we are?" He gestured at the hologram, his voice rising. "Some kind of monsters who eat entire civilizations." Lyra didn't respond directly. Instead, she played another sequence. This one showed alien ships fleeing a planet, pursued by large vessels resembling ancient Earth war machines. The ships fired relentlessly, obliterating everything in their path. Ethan realized with a sinking heart that the designs bore a faint resemblance to human technology. "That's not us," he said firmly, locking eyes, or where he thought Lyra's eyes might be. "We're not like that. Someone else must have done this." She clicked something into her device, then spoke slowly, as though choosing her words carefully. "Humans, myths, stories, warn, destroy, consume, always." Ethan pressed his forehead against the barrier, frustration bubbling over. "Those are just stories. They're not real. I'm real. Look at me. I'm not hurting anyone. You're the ones keeping me locked up." Lyra hesitated, then stepped closer. She reached out with her clawed hand, stopping just short of the barrier. The containment field shimmered faintly at her proximity, casting a soft glow on her reflective armor. "Humans, dangerous." Ethan met her gaze, or her visor, with steady determination. "We're not perfect, but we're not what you think. You're afraid of us because of lies and old stories. Let me prove we're more than that." She was silent for a long moment, then tapped her device again. The hologram vanished, and the barrier around Ethan's cell dissolved with a quiet hum. He staggered to his feet, surprised. "Wait, you're letting me out?" he asked cautiously. Lyra nodded slowly, then motioned for him to follow. Ethan hesitated, his instincts screaming that this could be a trap. But what choice did he have? He stepped out of the cell, keeping a careful distance as Lyra led him down a long, dimly lit corridor. The walls pulsed softly, displaying symbols and patterns Ethan couldn't decipher. Occasionally, they passed other aliens who stopped and stared, their body language tense. Whispers followed them, the sharp, clicking language carrying a mixture of fear and disbelief. Lyra stopped at a large, circular chamber where a group of aliens waited. They were clearly the Council, taller, more ornate in their appearance, their visors polished to a mirror shine. Their weapons were holstered, but their hands hovered close to them, ready to act. Ethan's stomach twisted into knots. Lyra stepped forward and spoke quickly, her tone firm but calm. The Council responded with sharp clicks and gestures, some of them pointing at Ethan. The room's tension was palpable, the air thick with mistrust. Finally, Lyra turned to Ethan, holding up her translator. "Prove. Not. Destroyer." Ethan frowned. "Prove. How?" The council member in the center stepped forward, its voice deep and rumbling as it spoke to Lyra. She hesitated, then translated. "Test. Show. Kindness. Not destroy." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "A test? What kind of test?" Lyra glanced at the council, then back at him. Her voice wavered slightly as she said, "Survive. Wild. No harm. No destroy. 3 days." Ethan's mind reeled. "You're throwing me into the wilderness. Alone." Lyra nodded. "Kindness. Life. No destroy." He exhaled sharply, his heart pounding. "All right," he said, squaring his shoulders. "I'll do it, but when I prove you wrong, you're going to listen to me." Lyra didn't respond, but there was something in her posture, hope, maybe, or doubt. Whatever it was enough to give Ethan a sliver of determination. This was his chance to change their minds, to show them that humans weren't monsters. Failure wasn't an option, the unexpected ally. The alien wilderness stretched out before Ethan like a living nightmare. The trees were towering, gnarled creatures, their bark pulsating faintly as if breathing. The ground beneath his boots squished unnervingly, covered in a moss-like substance that glowed faintly in the dim alien light. The air buzzed with sounds he couldn't place, sharp chirps, guttural growls, and a faint melodic hum that seemed to emanate from the landscape itself. Ethan adjusted the small survival pack Lyra had given him. Its contents barely enough for a single day. 3 days in this place, he muttered under his breath. No weapons, no shelter. They really don't believe in second chances. The alien council had been clear. Survive without harming the environment or the creatures that inhabited it. A test, they said, to prove humans were not the destroyers their myths claimed. Failure meant death, if not by the planet, then by their hands. As he ventured deeper into the wilderness, Ethan became acutely aware of eyes watching him. Shadows darted among the trees, low growls rumbling in the distance. Whatever lived here didn't seem particularly fond of his presence. Hours passed as he carefully navigated the terrain, avoiding the sharp, spiked plants and strange pools of liquid that shimmered ominously. Hunger gnawed at him, but every fruit or plant he examined exuded a faint, toxic smell. His water ration was already half empty, and the alien sun hadn't even set yet. "I've had worse days," Ethan muttered, trying to lift his spirits. The sound of a branch snapping made him freeze. Slowly, he turned, scanning the shadows. His eyes locked onto a creature lurking at the edge of the clearing. It was massive, easily the size of a small car, with sleek, black fur and glowing green eyes. Its body was muscular, feline-like, but its face bore sharp, insectoid mandibles that clicked menacingly. "Great," Ethan whispered. "A death cat with bug parts. Just what I needed." The creature stalked forward, its glowing eyes fixed on him. Ethan didn't move. He knew running would only trigger a chase, and fighting was out of the question. His heart pounded as the creature let out a low, guttural growl, its muscles coiling as it prepared to pounce. Before it could, a sharp whistle echoed through the trees. The creature froze, its ears flicking toward the sound. Ethan turned his head slightly and saw a figure step out from the shadows. Lyra. She held a small, glowing orb in her hand, which emitted a series of soft clicks and whistles. The creature hesitated, then backed away, disappearing into the forest with a final, reluctant growl. Ethan let out a shaky breath. "Lyra, what are you doing here?" She approached cautiously, her visor tilted as if scanning him. "Watch," she said simply, her voice clipped and precise through her translator. "Watch me. You're supposed to just let me wander around and hope I don't die." Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she gestured for him to follow and began walking into the forest. Ethan hesitated but decided he didn't have much of a choice. "You know, this whole survival test thing is kind of rigged," he said as he trailed after her. "This planet clearly wants to kill me. How am I supposed to survive without defending myself?" Lyra stopped abruptly and turned to face him. "Survive. With mind, not harm." Ethan frowned. "That's easy for you to say. You've probably lived here your whole life. I don't know the rules of this place. I don't even know what's safe to eat." She considered him for a moment, then reached into a small pouch on her belt. She pulled out a tiny device and handed it to him. It looked like a simple scanner, but when he activated it, the screen lit up with symbols and colors. "What's this?" he asked. "Help," Lyra replied. "Find food, water, safe." Ethan stared at her, trying to gauge her intentions. "Why are you helping me? Aren't you worried I'll fail your test and prove your myths right?" Lyra's posture shifted slightly, almost as if she were uncertain. "Truth matters. Myths lie. Need. See human. Real human." Ethan felt a strange mix of gratitude and guilt. Lyra was risking something by helping him, and he wasn't sure why. "All right," he said, pocketing the device. "Thanks. I guess this means you're on my side." She didn't respond, but her visor tilted toward him briefly before she turned and began walking again. Ethan followed, the forest growing darker and more menacing with each step. As night fell, the alien wilderness came alive with sounds and glowing lights. Strange creatures flitted through the air, their translucent wings shimmering like stained glass. In the distance, Ethan could hear the roar of something enormous, its call reverberating through the ground. Lyra stopped near a cluster of bioluminescent plants and gestured for Ethan to sit. "Rest," she said. "Danger, less here." Ethan slumped against a tree, exhaustion catching up with him. "You know, for a test, this feels more like a death sentence." Lyra didn't reply immediately. She sat a short distance away, her visor reflecting the glowing plants. Counsel, wrong. Fear, blind. Ethan looked at her, surprised by the vulnerability in her voice. "You don't believe the myths, do you?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Need, truth." Ethan leaned back, staring at the alien sky, its stars unfamiliar and distant. "Then let's prove them wrong. Together." Lyra didn't respond, but for the first time, Ethan felt a small spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could change each other's worlds. The test of humanity. The wilderness was alive in ways Ethan couldn't have imagined. The alien forest didn't just exist. It moved, breathed, and seemed to conspire against him. The trees shifted their massive limbs subtly, casting moving shadows that disoriented him. Vines crept along the ground, their tendrils curling toward his boots when he paused too long. The air was thick, not with humidity, but with tension, as though the planet itself were watching his every move. This was his second day in the wild, and the survival pack Lyra had given him was now almost empty. The small scanner she'd slipped to him, a breach of the Council's strict orders, no doubt, had been a lifesaver. It identified edible fruits and safe water sources, though such opportunities were scarce and fleeting. Every moment felt like a gamble, a balance between trust in the scanner and his own instincts. Ethan crouched by a shallow stream, cupping his hands to drink. The water was cold, a relief against the heat radiating from the strange bioluminescent moss carpeting the ground. As he drank, his eyes darted around the trees, always alert. The sounds of the forest were an orchestra of clicks, growls, and whistles. He'd learned quickly that silence was a warning, not peace. Suddenly, the scanner in his pocket beeped softly. Ethan froze, pulling it out to read the screen. A flashing red glyph appeared, accompanied by an unfamiliar symbol. He didn't need to understand the language to know what it meant. Danger. He barely had time to react before a guttural snarl erupted from behind him. Spinning around, Ethan saw a hulking creature emerge from the undergrowth. Its body was covered in sleek, black scales that shimmered like oil, and its 4 glowing yellow eyes locked onto him with predatory precision. It was a mix of reptile and mammal, with sharp claws and fangs that gleamed as it snarled again. Ethan's heart raced. "No weapons," he muttered under his breath, recalling the Council's test. "No harm." Right. Fantastic. The creature lunged, and Ethan dove to the side, barely avoiding the swipe of its massive claws. Rolling to his feet, he scrambled for a plan. He couldn't fight it. He wasn't allowed to. He couldn't run far. The creature was faster. He had to think. His eyes darted to the glowing moss beneath their feet. The scanner had flagged it as toxic if ingested but harmless to the touch. An idea sparked in his mind. Quickly, he grabbed a handful of the moss, crushing it into a pulpy mass. "All right, big guy," Ethan said, backing away as the creature circled him. "You're hungry, right? Let's see how you like this." He hurled the moss directly into the creature's face. It snarled in surprise, shaking its head violently as the luminous pulp stuck to its scales. The distraction was enough for Ethan to dash toward a dense thicket of trees, their tightly packed trunks forming a natural barrier. He slipped through a narrow gap, his body scraping against the rough bark. The creature roared, clawing at the barrier but unable to squeeze through. Panting, Ethan leaned against the tree, trying to steady his breathing. "Note to self," he muttered. "Always trust the scanner." As the creature's growls faded, Ethan noticed something odd. The forest was quiet again, not the eerie silence of impending danger, but a stillness that felt intentional. He stepped cautiously out of the thicket, scanning his surroundings. To his surprise, Lyra stood a short distance away, her visor glowing faintly in the dim light. She held her translator in one hand, her posture tense. "Clever," she said, her voice soft through the device. "You? Not harm." Ethan frowned, brushing dirt from his arms. "Were you following me? I thought this test was supposed to be solo." Lyra hesitated, then stepped closer. "Watch. Protect. Counsel. Strict. But curious." He raised an eyebrow. "So you're breaking the rules to see if I survive?" She didn't respond immediately, her visor tilting slightly as if she were studying him. "You? Think. Not destroy." Ethan crossed his arms. "I don't destroy because I don't want to die. That's not exactly kindness, it's survival." Lyra shook her head, gesturing toward the glowing moss still clinging to his hands. "You? Choose. No kill. No harm." He blinked, realizing she was right. He could have tried to fight the creature, maybe even killed it. But instead, he'd chosen another path. A path that proved the myths about humans weren't entirely true. Before Ethan could respond, a sharp metallic hum filled the air. Lyra stiffened, her hand flying to a device on her belt. Ethan recognized the sound. It was the same noise the Council's weapons had made when they'd captured him. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice low. Lyra's claws tightened around the device. "Hunters. Come. Hunters." Ethan's stomach dropped. "You mean the Council sent someone to?" She nodded. "They? No trust. Fear. Failure." Ethan clenched his fists, anger surging through him. "So they're just going to kill me if they think I can't pass their test. Doesn't matter if I actually prove them wrong." Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she turned, motioning for him to follow. "Come. Hide. Prove. Later." Ethan hesitated. He could hear the distant hum growing louder. The sound of something, or someone, approaching. Lyra's defiance, her choice to help him despite the risk, filled him with a strange mix of gratitude and determination. "No," he said firmly. "I'm done hiding. If they want to see what kind of person I am, they'll see it. On my terms." Lyra stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then, we stand. Together." For the first time since the test began, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Maybe survival wasn't just about passing their test. It was about showing them the truth, the revelation. The night sky above the alien wilderness shimmered with unfamiliar constellations, each star casting a faint glow across the strange, shifting landscape. Ethan stood at the edge of a cliff, overlooking a vast valley bathed in the soft bioluminescent hues of alien flora. Behind him, Lyra was silent, her visor tilted as if scanning the horizon for threats. "I don't get it," Ethan muttered, his voice carrying a mix of exhaustion and frustration. "Your council sends me out here to prove I'm not a monster, and now they send hunters to kill me before I can even finish the test. What's the point?" Lyra hesitated before answering, her voice mechanical through the translator. "Fear. Deep. Stories. Control. Hunters. No, listen. They end. Threat." Ethan turned to her, his expression hard. "I'm not a threat. They're just too afraid to see that." Lyra said nothing, but her body language betrayed her unease. She motioned for Ethan to follow, leading him down a narrow, rocky path that wound its way into the valley. The air grew cooler, and the hum of the alien forest softened as they descended. After a while, they came to a clearing. At the center was an enormous ancient structure, a tower carved from smooth black stone that seemed to absorb the light around it. Strange symbols and patterns were etched into its surface, glowing faintly as though pulsing with life. Ethan stopped, staring up at the towering relic. What is this place? Lyra stepped forward, her hand grazing the surface of the structure. Before, council. Before, fear. Humans. Here. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Humans? You mean us. Earth humans. She nodded slowly, activating a small device on her wrist. A hologram flared to life, showing an image of the tower as it might have looked long ago. Ships hovered above it, their designs unmistakably human. The hologram shifted, showing humans and aliens working side by side, exchanging knowledge and building together. This truth, Lyra said. Humans. Save, not destroy. Ethan's breath caught as he took in the images. We were here to help. We weren't destroyers. We were allies. So what happened? Why does your council think we're monsters? The hologram shifted again. This time, it showed chaos. Flames engulfing cities, alien ships fleeing as human-like vessels pursued them. But the designs of these human ships were crude, inconsistent, as though cobbled together by someone imitating humanity. Imposters, Ethan murmured. These weren't Earth ships. Someone else made them to look like ours. Lyra tilted her head, her visor reflecting the flickering hologram. Council. Blind. Believe. Only fear. Ethan stepped closer to the tower, running his hand along the smooth stone. This tower, it's proof. Your people need to see this. If they understand what really happened, maybe they'll stop seeing us as the enemy. Lyra hesitated. Council. Not listen. Hunters. Close. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then we don't wait for them to come to us. We take the truth to them. Before Lyra could respond, a sharp metallic hum echoed through the valley. The sound was cold and relentless, a signal Ethan recognized all too well. The hunters had found them. Lyra turned sharply, activating her translator. They hear. No time. Ethan clenched his fists, stepping back toward the tower. Then we make time. Can this thing send a message? Show the truth. Lyra's visor flickered as she scanned the structure. Maybe. Old. Tech. Risk. High. Higher than getting killed by your hunters? Ethan asked, already searching the base of the tower for an entrance. Lyra hesitated only a moment before nodding. She joined him, and together they found a hidden panel etched into the stone. With a sharp hiss, a doorway opened, revealing a dimly lit corridor lined with ancient consoles and blinking lights. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of dust and age. Ethan's breath quickened as he approached the largest console, its surface covered in alien glyphs. This has to be it, he said, pointing to the console. Help me figure out how to use it. Lyra moved beside him, her claws deftly navigating the alien symbols. The console hummed to life, projecting a massive hologram of the galaxy. A series of glowing dots lit up, connecting in patterns Ethan couldn't understand. Truth. Here, Lyra said, her voice steady, but signal weak. Hunters. Come. Ethan pressed his hands against the console, staring at the hologram. Then we fight for it. We make them see. The tower trembled slightly as the hum of approaching hunters grew louder. Ethan turned to Lyra, his determination etched into his face. I need you to trust me. Whatever happens, we have to get this message out. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. Trust. Given. Together. The two worked side by side, the console's lights growing brighter as the tower's ancient systems roared back to life. Outside, the hunters closed in, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. But inside the tower, a spark of hope ignited. Ethan and Lyra were no longer just running. They were fighting for the truth. And the truth, Ethan knew, could change everything. Redemption and alliance. The ancient tower roared to life, its long-dormant systems awakening in a cascade of light and sound. Ethan and Lyra stood side by side at the main console, their faces illuminated by the glowing holograms spiraling around them. The air hummed with energy, and the deep, rhythmic vibrations of the tower reverberated through the valley outside. "We've got the truth," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the rising tension. "Now we just need to make sure everyone sees it." Lyra's visor flickered, reflecting the swirling data. Signal. Weak. Hunters. Close. Ethan clenched his jaw. He could already hear the telltale hum of approaching alien crafts, their weapons charging in preparation for the kill. The hunters wouldn't wait. They'd destroy the tower and its occupants without hesitation. He turned to Lyra. "We need more power. Can this thing amplify the signal?" Lyra's claws danced across the console, pulling up schematics of the tower. Core. Unstable. Amplify. Risk destruction. "Better the tower blows up than we fail," Ethan replied firmly. "If this works, your people will know the truth. That's all that matters." Lyra hesitated, her posture stiff. Then, with a nod, she activated a sequence of commands. The tower shuddered violently as its core began to redirect energy toward the communication array. Outside, a blinding beam of light shot skyward, cutting through the dense alien atmosphere like a sword. The hunters weren't far behind. Through the tower's external monitors, Ethan saw their sleek, insectoid ships descending into the valley. Their weapons crackled with energy, aimed directly at the tower. "They're going to fire," Lyra warned, her voice sharp through the translator. Ethan's mind raced. He scanned the console, searching for anything that could buy them more time. There has to be a defense system, something to hold them off. Lyra shook her head. Tower, not weapon. Peace, not war. Of course, Ethan thought bitterly. A monument to peace wouldn't have a way to fight back. But they didn't need to fight. They just needed to stall. His eyes landed on a dormant subsystem, labeled in alien glyphs, that Lyra had translated earlier. Atmospheric manipulation. "Can we use this?" he asked, pointing at the controls. Lyra studied the display, then nodded slowly. "Weather, shift, delay, not stop." "Good enough," Ethan said. "Do it." Lyra activated the subsystem, and the tower emitted a low-frequency pulse. Moments later, the air outside grew heavy, and dark clouds swirled above the valley. A sudden, violent storm erupted, with winds so strong that the hunters' ships were forced to adjust their trajectories. Lightning crackled across the sky, illuminating the scene in blinding flashes. Inside the tower, Ethan and Lyra worked feverishly to stabilize the core. The data they'd uncovered, the holograms of humanity's peaceful past and the falsified myths, was uploading to the planet's global network. The truth was moments away from being broadcast to every corner of the alien world. But the hunters were relentless. One of their ships broke through the storm, firing a concentrated beam at the tower. The impact rocked the structure, sending sparks flying from the console. "We're running out of time," Ethan shouted over the noise. Lyra's visor flickered as she analyzed the damage. "Core, unstable. Overload. Soon." Ethan gritted his teeth. "Let it overload. Just make sure the signal gets out first." Lyra hesitated, then began rerouting power to the communications array. The console's lights dimmed, and the holograms flickered, but the signal grew stronger. Outside, the beam of light intensified, cutting through the storm with renewed vigor. The hunters closed in for a final strike. Ethan could feel the tower trembling beneath his feet, its ancient structure barely holding together. But the console emitted a soft chime, signaling that the upload was complete. "It's done," Lyra said, her voice tinged with both relief and urgency. "Truth, sent." Ethan exhaled, a mix of triumph and exhaustion washing over him. "Then let's get out of here." But before they could move, the tower's core let out a deafening roar. Energy surged through the structure, and the walls began to crack under the strain. Lyra grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him toward a hidden escape hatch. "Hurry," she urged. The two of them sprinted through the collapsing corridors, the tower's ancient systems failing one by one. Behind them, the core exploded in a blinding flash of light, sending shockwaves through the valley. Ethan and Lyra dove out of the hatch just as the tower imploded, its remains swallowed by the earth. They lay on the ground, gasping for breath as debris rained down around them. The storm began to dissipate, and the valley fell into an uneasy silence. Ethan sat up, his chest heaving. "Did it work?" he asked, turning to Lyra. She activated her wrist device, scanning the network. After a tense moment, she nodded. "Signal received. All. No truth." Ethan allowed himself a small smile. "Then it's over." But Lyra shook her head. "Not over. Fear, deep. Change, slow." Ethan stood, brushing dirt from his clothes. "Then we start with you. Your people need leaders who can see past the myths. If they're willing to listen, I'll help." Lyra's visor tilted toward him, her posture softening. Together, change. Above them, the alien sky cleared, revealing the stars once more. The hunters' ships had vanished, retreating in the face of the undeniable truth. For the first time, the world felt still, not with fear, but with the quiet promise of something new. Ethan looked at Lyra and extended a hand. "Let's show them what humans are really like." Lyra hesitated, then placed her clawed hand in his. In that moment, amidst the ruins of the tower and the echoes of fear, a fragile alliance was born. One built not on myths or fear, but on understanding and hope.